Okay, welcome back. We've got another Spanish one for you today. Last week we did El Conde Dracula, which was the Spanish version of Dracula. And that one was very popular with Spanish viewers. We got about 100 Spanish viewers watching that one, so muchas gracias for that. Sorry I can't do the whole video in Spanish, but we have an interesting one to talk about for everyone today. This is called Los Monstruos del Terror, which means the monsters of terror. And as you can see, there are a lot of monsters on that poster. We have Frankenstein's monster, a werewolf, a mummy, and a vampire, all in the one poster. But before we talk about this, we need to talk about another movie. Both movies were written and starred in by this man. His name is Jacinto Molina, better known to most of the world as Paul Naschy. He wrote both movies, and they were basically his first two movies. His very first movie that he wrote, actually, it's a little bit confusing because Los Monstruos del Terror was created first, but didn't come out till 1970, even though it was created in 1967. And then this movie, La Marca del Hombre Lobo, which means the mark of the wolf man, was created and came out in 1968. Both movies written by Jacinto Molina. The first one, Monsters of Terror, didn't come out right away because it couldn't get picked up by distributors. Now, they tried to get Lon Chaney to be the wolf man in these movies, but he turned them down. And if you watch the movies, you'll see why. Also, these were made in the late 60s, so Lon Chaney would have been pretty old by that point. Lon Chaney, of course, starred as the Wolfman in the Universal Wolfman, which was an early 40s movie. So, anyway, they couldn't get Lon Chaney, so they got the writer, Jacinto Molina, to be the Wolfman in these movies. And this movie here, The Mark of the Wolfman, was a co-production between Spain and West Germany. And the West German financial backers said that they thought it would be more marketable if Jacinto Molina took a more German-sounding name or a more Teutonic-sounding name. So he adopted the name Paul Naschy. So most people know him as Paul Naschy. So that's Paul Naschy, right in mid-transition into werewolf mode. Now, they wanted to make this movie fully Spanish and set it in Spain, but the Spanish government ruled that illegal. So they actually had to move it to Central Europe, and they made the character Polish instead of Spanish. So the character's name is Waldemar Daniński, Count Waldemar Daniński. So in this movie, which came out in 1968, Waldemar Daniński gets bitten by a werewolf, and that werewolf changes Waldemar Daniński into a werewolf, and it's very much like The Wolfman and Curse of the Werewolf, which came out in 1961, where the character, while human, does not want to be a werewolf, does not want to kill anyone, but of course when the full moon goes up, he starts killing people. Now, this movie is kind of strange and a little bit hard to follow because it turns out that the wolf men, because there's more than one, are actually being controlled and experimented on by a set of vampires, and you can see the vampire there in the poster. So, in the end, Waldemar Daniński actually is able to kill the vampires, wants to kill himself, and finally takes a silver bullet, and so therefore he is dead. Now, what makes this confusing, well, there's many things that make it confusing, but in the United States, this movie was called Frankenstein's Bloody Terror. Now, the reason it was called that was because the distributors had promised a Frankenstein movie for the American market because there were a lot of popular Frankenstein-related movies, especially the Hammer Frankenstein movies were doing well at that time. So they just called it Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, and like the first 30 seconds of the movie show an animated Frankenstein's monster turning into a werewolf, and supposedly the werewolf that bites Waldemar Daninsky was a member of the Frankenstein family. So that doesn't really make sense, and I don't think they even say that in the Spanish version of the film, but in the English version of the film, that's what happens. It's the same exact film, but, just dubbed differently. And it's one of those movies where different actors seem to be speaking different languages. So even the Spanish version is dubbed, because I did take a look at the Spanish version, and it was dubbed just like the English version was. Plus, it didn't have English subtitles, so I ended up watching the English version. Now, this brings us to, there's a picture of Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, the American poster. Okay. This brings us to Los Monstruos del Terror, Monsters of Terror, which was made before but came out after. So by this time, the world had already seen Jacinto Molina, a.k.a. Paul Naschy, in his werewolf form. So in this movie, which was released in the United States as Assignment Terror, and then re-released in multiple countries as Dracula versus Frankenstein, even though Dracula doesn't show up, but this time Frankenstein does show up, okay? So I don't know if you've got that all straight, okay? But to make it more confusing and more complicated, this movie is actually about aliens. So we have aliens, including the main alien played by Michael Rennie, who was a well-known international actor at the time, and he had been in The Earth Stands Still, The Day the Earth Stood Still. He was the lead in that from 1951. He was a well-known actor in this movie. He's an alien, and he comes to Earth to destroy humankind, and in order to do so, he's going to resurrect all the famous monsters that people are terrified of, and the famous monsters are going to kill everyone. So, in this movie, we do have Frankenstein's monster, although in the movie they don't pronounce it Frankenstein and they say it real quick, so I'm not sure, it's like Frankenstein or something like that. Okay, so we have Frankenstein's monster resurrected by aliens. The werewolf, the Wolfman, resurrected by aliens, once again played by Paul Naschy, aka Jacinto Molina, who wrote the movie. We also have a mummy, and we also have a vampire. The vampire is not Dracula, even though the movie was released at certain points as Dracula versus Frankenstein. Also, the vampire and Frankenstein's monster here do not fight each other. However, the Wolfman does fight the mummy and the Frankenstein's monster. So, and actually the vampire just fights humans. I watched the movie and paid very close attention, but it's really hard to know what's going on because all of a sudden characters appear in different places. There are a lot of characters, which I usually like, although there's almost no characterization because this movie is only an hour and a half long, and you have to deal with aliens, monsters, werewolf, vampire, mummy, all have multiple scenes, some scenes with each other, some scenes fighting each other, and basically you also have all these different characters that end up having sex with each other in the movie, but there was not any indication of romance prior to those scenes. It's also rated PG, so the sex scenes are very short. In fact, most of the scenes are very short. However, that doesn't stop it from being fun. This movie is very poorly rated by most, and they ran out of funding during filming multiple times. So the editing is very poor, and I guess most people would consider it a bad movie, but when you have all these monsters going at each other, I'm enjoying it. It's fun to me. So the story is very confusing and not very strong. We have lots of good action and lots of good special effects, especially considering this was made in the late 60s. We have some really cool stuff going on. The werewolf looks great. The mummy looks great. Frankenstein's monster looks okay. We also have a point where we have a skeleton with a stake in it. The stake's pulled out, and the skeleton refleshizes, it's all of a sudden it's a skeleton with organs and eyeballs. That was pretty cool. Ends up turning into Dracula. They don't really have good transition effects, but there is this mid-transition shot where the organs are kind of pulsing. That was pretty good. Yeah, so all that stuff looks great. There's some explosions. At one point, the werewolf stuffs the mummy inside the large wheel of a mill, spins him around, and lights the whole thing on fire. I enjoyed that part. I guess one of the complaints would be that the aliens are just human looking. I mean, this is what the alien looks like. It's just the actor. So I would have liked if the aliens would have done something else. But since they kept running out of money, I guess we can't complain too much. I'm glad we even got to see the movie at all. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 for sheer fun factor, okay, and for the special effects. Don't come in here looking for a good story, and the acting is basically null and void because it's all dubbed over anyway, so you can't tell, you can't hear any of the original actors' voices anyway. You can tell that some of them are speaking English and that some of them are definitely not speaking English, but that's what we get with a lot of European movies of the time. So, altogether a fun one. I should mention also that Jacinto Molina starred as this exact character at least 11 times, possibly 12. There was a movie supposedly written and shot in 1969 that would have come out after The Mark of the Wolf Man, but apparently, according to Jacinto Molina, after they shot it, the director died before he could pay to get the movie, printed. Anyway, no one's ever seen it, and when asked about who acted in it, he gave a few names of people that have never appeared in anything else, so a lot of people believe that second of the 12 movies never came out. Although it's really hard to say what the order, which one's first and which one's second. Like, this one came out second, but it was written first, and then that other one just never came out. But anyway, these are the first two that anyone has ever seen, and the third one that anyone had seen, well, this is also confusing, but the next one to be released didn't get released until 1971, but in the chronology, there was another one that was made between the 1971 movie and this one, and these two. It was made in 1970 and not released until 1972 or 1974. So we will be talking about that one next time because chronologically, it comes next. And the one that comes after that came out in 71. So we're going to do that one next. And we'll see if the story makes any more sense or if the fun stays at this high level. These Spanish horror movies are very interesting. So, we'll see you next time.